This is a continuation of The Variable Man by Philip K. Dick, containing the first section of Part 4. Part 4. 3 days later, Joseph Dixon slid a closed-circuit message plate across the desk to his boss. "Here, you might be interested in this." Reinhardt picked the plate up slowly. "What is it? You came all the way here to show me this?" "That's right. Why didn't you vid-screen it?" Dixon smiled grimly. "You'll understand when you decode it. It's from Proxima Centaurus." "Centaurus? Our counterintelligence service. They sent it direct to me. Here, I'll decode it for you. Save you the trouble." Dixon came around behind Reinhardt's desk. He leaned over the commissioner's shoulder, taking hold of the plate and breaking the seal with his thumbnail. "Hang on," Dixon said. "This is going to hit you hard. According to our agents on our moon, the Centauran High Council has called an emergency session to deal with the problem of Terra's impending attack. Centauran relay couriers have reported to the High Council that the Terran bomb Icarus is virtually complete. Work on the bomb has been rushed through final stages in the underground laboratories under the Ural Range, directed by the Terran physicist Peter Sherikov. So I understand from Sherikov himself. Are you surprised the Centaurans know about the bomb? They have spies swarming over Terra. That's no news. There's more." Dixon traced the message plate grimly with an unsteady finger. "The Centauran relay couriers reported that Peter Sherikov brought an expert mechanic out of a previous time continuum to complete the wiring of the turret." Reinhardt staggered, holding on tight to the desk. He closed his eyes, gasping. "The Variable Man is still alive," Dixon murmured. "I don't know how, or why. There's nothing left of the Albertines. And how the hell did the man get halfway around the world?" Reinhardt opened his eyes slowly, his face twisting. "Sherikov! He must have removed him before the attack. I told Sherikov the attack was forthcoming. I gave him the exact hour. He had to get help, from the Variable Man. He couldn't meet his promise otherwise." Reinhardt leaped up and began to pace back and forth. "I've already informed the SRB machines that the Variable Man has been destroyed. The machines now show the original 7-to-6 ratio in our favor. But the ratio is based on false information. Then you'll have to withdraw the false data and restore the original situation." "No." Reinhardt shook his head. "I can't do that. The machines must be kept functioning. We can't allow them to jam again. It's too dangerous. If Duff should become aware that—" "What are you going to do then?" Dixon picked up the message plate. "You can't leave the machines with false data. That's treason. The data can't be withdrawn, not unless equivalent data exists to take its place." Reinhardt paced angrily back and forth. "Damn it! I was certain the man was dead. This is an incredible situation. He must be eliminated, at any cost." Suddenly Reinhardt stopped pacing. "The turret, it's probably finished by this time, correct?" Dixon nodded slowly in agreement. "With the Variable Man helping, Sherikov has undoubtedly completed work well ahead of schedule." Reinhardt's gray eyes flickered. "Then he's no longer of any use. Even to Sherikov. We could take a chance. Even if there were active opposition." "What's this?" Dixon demanded. "What are you thinking about? How many units are ready for immediate action? How large a force can we raise without notice?" "Because of the war, we're mobilized on a 24-hour basis. There are 70 air units and about 200 surface units. The balance of the security forces have been transferred to the line, under military control." "Men?" "We have about 5,000 men ready to go, still on Terra, most of them in the process of being transferred to military transports. I can hold it up at any time." "Missiles?" "Fortunately, the launching tubes have not yet been disassembled. They're still here on Terra. In another few days, they'll be moving out for the colonial fracas." "Then they're available for immediate use?" "Yes." "Good." Reinhardt locked his hands, knotting his fingers harshly together in sudden decision. "That will do exactly. Unless I am completely wrong, Sherikov has only a half-dozen air units and no surface cars, and only about 200 men, some defense shields, of course." "What are you planning?" Reinhardt's face was gray and hard, like stone. "Send out orders for all available security units to be unified under your immediate command. Have them ready to move by 4 o'clock this afternoon. We're going to pay a visit," Reinhardt stated grimly. "A surprise visit, on Peter Sherikov." "Stop here," Reinhardt ordered. The surface car slowed to a halt. Reinhardt peered cautiously out, studying the horizon ahead. On all sides, a desert of scrub grass and sand stretched out. Nothing moved or stirred. To the right, the grass and sand rose up to form immense peaks, a range of mountains without end, disappearing finally into the distance. The Urals. "Over there," Reinhardt said to Dixon, pointing. "See? No? Look hard. It's difficult to spot unless you know what to look for. Vertical pipes, some kind of vent, or periscopes." Dixon saw them finally. "I would have driven past without noticing. It's well concealed. The main labs are a mile down, under the range itself. It's virtually impregnable. Sherikov had it built years ago to withstand any attack, from the air, by surface cars, bombs, missiles. He must feel safe down there." "No doubt." Reinhardt gazed up at the sky. A few faint black dots could be seen, moving lazily about in broad circles. "Those aren't ours, are they? I gave orders." "No, they're not ours. All our units are out of sight. Those belong to Sherikov, his patrol." Reinhardt relaxed. "Good." He reached over and flicked on the vid screen over the board of the car. "This screen is shielded? It can't be traced?" "There's no way they can spot it back to us. It's non-directional." The screen glowed into life. Reinhardt punched the combination keys and sat back to wait. After a time, an image formed on the screen. A heavy face, bushy black beard, and large eyes. Peter Sherikov gazed at Reinhardt with surprised curiosity. "Commissioner, where are you calling from? How's the work progressing?" Reinhardt broke in coldly. "Is Icarus almost complete?" Sherikov beamed with expansive pride. "He's done, Commissioner. 2 days ahead of time. Icarus is ready to be launched into space. I tried to call your office, but they told me—" "I'm not at my office." Reinhardt leaned toward the screen. "Open your entrance tunnel at the surface. You're about to receive visitors." Sherikov blinked. "Visitors?" "I'm coming down to see you. About Icarus. Have the tunnel open for me at once." "Exactly where are you, Commissioner?" "On the surface." Sherikov's eyes flickered. "Oh, but—" "Open up," Reinhardt snapped. He glanced at his wristwatch. "I'll be at the entrance in 5 minutes. I expect to find it ready for me." "Of course." Sherikov nodded in bewilderment. "I'm always glad to see you, Commissioner, but 5 minutes then." Reinhardt cut the circuit. The screen died. He turned quickly to Dixon. "You stay up here, as we arranged. I'll go down with one company of police. You understand the necessity of exact timing on this? We won't slip up. Everything's ready. All units are in their places." "Good." Reinhardt pushed the door open for him. "You join your directional staff. I'll proceed toward the tunnel entrance." "Good luck." Dixon leaped out of the car, onto the sandy ground. A gust of dry air swirled into the car around Reinhardt. "I'll see you later." Reinhardt slammed the door. He turned to the group of police crouched in the rear of the car, their guns held tightly. "Here we go," Reinhardt murmured. "Hold on." The car raced across the sandy ground, toward the tunnel entrance to Sherikov's underground fortress. Sherikov met Reinhardt at the bottom end of the tunnel, where the tunnel opened up onto the main floor of the lab. The big Pole approached, his hand out, beaming with pride and satisfaction. "It's a pleasure to see you, Commissioner. This is an historic moment." Reinhardt got out of the car, with his group of armed security police. "Calls for a celebration, doesn't it?" he said. "That's a good idea. We're 2 days ahead, Commissioner. The SRB machines will be interested. The odds should change abruptly at the news." "Let's go down to the lab. I want to see the control turret myself." A shadow crossed Sherikov's face. "I'd rather not bother the workmen right now, Commissioner. They've been under a great load, trying to complete the turret in time. I believe they're putting a few last finishes on it at this moment. We can view them by vid screen. I'm curious to see them at work. It must be difficult to wire such minute relays." Sherikov shook his head. "Sorry, Commissioner. No vid screen on them. I won't allow it. This is too important. Our whole future depends on it." Reinhardt snapped a signal to his company of police. "Put this man under arrest." Sherikov blanched. His mouth fell open. The police moved quickly around him, their gun tubes up, jabbing into him. He was searched rapidly, efficiently. His gun belt and concealed energy screen were yanked off. "What's going on?" Sherikov demanded, some color returning to his face. "What are you doing?" "You're under arrest for the duration of the war. You're relieved of all authority. From now on, one of my men will operate designs. When the war is over, you'll be tried before the council and President Duff." Sherikov shook his head, dazed. "I don't understand. What's this all about? Explain it to me, Commissioner. What's happened?" Reinhardt signaled to his police. "Get ready. We're going into the lab. We may have to shoot our way in. The variable man should be in the area of the bomb, working on the control turret." Instantly, Sherikov's face hardened. His black eyes glittered, alert and hostile. Reinhardt laughed harshly. "We received a counterintelligence report from Centaurus. I'm surprised at you, Sherikov. You know the Centaurans are everywhere with their relay couriers. You should have known." Sherikov moved, fast. All at once he broke away from the police, throwing his massive body against them. They fell, scattering. Sherikov ran, directly at the wall. The police fired wildly. Reinhardt fumbled frantically for his gun tube, pulling it up. Sherikov reached the wall, running head down, energy beams flashing around him. He struck against the wall and vanished. "Down!" Reinhardt shouted. He dropped to his hands and knees. All around him, his police dived for the floor. Reinhardt cursed wildly, dragging himself quickly toward the door. They had to get out, and right away. Sherikov had escaped. A false wall, an energy barrier set to respond to his pressure. He had dashed through it to safety. From all sides an inferno burst, a flaming roar of death surging over them, around them, on every side. The room was alive with blazing masses of destruction, bouncing from wall to wall. They were caught between four banks of power, all of them open to full discharge. A trap, a death trap. Reinhardt reached the hall gasping for breath. He leaped to his feet. A few security police followed him. Behind them, in the flaming room, the rest of the company screamed and struggled, blasted out of existence by the leaping bursts of power. Reinhardt assembled his remaining men. Already, Sherikov's guards were forming. At one end of the corridor, a snub-barreled robot gun was maneuvering into position. A siren wailed. Guards were running on all sides, hurrying to battle stations. The robot gun opened fire. Part of the corridor exploded, bursting into fragments. Clouds of choking debris and particles swept around them. Reinhardt and his police retreated, moving back along the corridor. They reached a junction. A second robot gun was rumbling toward them, hurrying to get within range. Reinhardt fired carefully, aiming at its delicate control. Abruptly, the gun spun convulsively. It lashed against the wall, smashing itself into the unyielding metal. Then it collapsed in a heap, gears still whining and spinning. "Come on!" Reinhardt moved away, crouching and running. He glanced at his watch. Almost time. A few more minutes. A group of lab guards appeared ahead of them. Reinhardt fired. Behind him, his police fired past him, violet shafts of energy catching the group of guards as they entered the corridor. The guards spilled apart, falling and twisting. Part of them settled into dust, drifting down the corridor. Reinhardt made his way toward the lab, crouching and leaping, pushing past heaps of debris and remains, followed by his men. "Come on! Don't stop!" Suddenly from around them, the booming, enlarged voice of Sherikov thundered, magnified by rows of wall speakers along the corridor. Reinhardt halted, glancing around. "Reinhardt, you haven't got a chance. You'll never get back to the surface. Throw down your guns and give up. You're surrounded on all sides. You're a mile under the surface." Reinhardt threw himself into motion, pushing into billowing clouds of particles drifting along the corridor. "Are you sure, Sherikov?" he grunted. Sherikov laughed, his harsh metallic peals rolling in waves against Reinhardt's eardrums. "I don't want to have to kill you, Commissioner. You're vital to the war. I'm sorry you found out about the variable man. I admit we overlooked the Centauran espionage as a factor in this. But now that you know about him..." Suddenly Sherikov's voice broke off. A deep rumble had shaken the floor, a lapping vibration that shuddered through the corridor. Reinhardt sagged with relief. He peered through the clouds of debris, making out the figures on his watch. Right on time. Not a second late. The first of the hydrogen missiles, launched from the council buildings on the other side of the world, were beginning to arrive. The attack had begun. At exactly 6 o'clock, Joseph Dixon, standing on the surface 4 miles from the entrance tunnel, gave the sign to the waiting units. The first job was to break down Sherikov's defense screens. The missiles had to penetrate without interference. At Dixon's signal, a fleet of 30 security ships dived from a height of 10 miles, swooping above the mountains, directly over the underground laboratories. Within 5 minutes, the defense screens had been smashed and all the tower projectors leveled flat. Now, the mountains were virtually unprotected. "So far, so good," Dixon murmured as he watched from his secure position. The fleet of security ships roared back, their work done. Across the face of the desert, the police surface cars were crawling rapidly toward the entrance tunnel, snaking from side to side. Meanwhile, Sherikov's counterattack had begun to go into operation. Guns mounted among the hills opened fire. Vast columns of flame burst up in the path of the advancing cars. The cars hesitated and retreated as the plain was churned up by a howling vortex, a thundering chaos of explosions. Here and there, a car vanished in a cloud of particles. A group of cars moving away suddenly scattered, caught up by a giant wind that lashed across them and swept them up into the air. Dixon gave orders to have the cannon silenced. The police air arm again swept overhead, a sullen roar of jets that shook the ground below. The police ships divided expertly and hurtled down on the cannon protecting the hills. The cannon forgot the surface cars and lifted their snouts to meet the attack. Again and again, the airships came, rocking the mountains with titanic blasts. The guns became silent. Their echoing boom diminished, died away reluctantly, as bombs took critical toll of them. Dixon watched with satisfaction as the bombing came to an end. The airships rose in a thick swarm, black gnats shooting up in triumph from a dead carcass. They hurried back as emergency anti-aircraft robot guns swung into position and saturated the sky with blazing puffs of energy. Dixon checked his wristwatch. The missiles were already on the way from North America. Only a few minutes remained. The surface cars, freed by the successful bombing, began to regroup for a new frontal attack. Again they crawled forward, across the burning plain, bearing down cautiously on the battered wall of mountains, heading toward the twisted wrecks that had been the ring of defense guns, toward the entrance tunnel. An occasional cannon fired feebly at them. The cars came grimly on. Now, in the hollows of the hills, Sherikov's troops were hurrying to the surface to meet the attack. The first car reached the shadow of the mountains. A deafening hail of fire burst loose. Small robot guns appeared everywhere, needle barrels emerging from behind hidden screens, trees and shrubs, rocks, stones. The police cars were caught in a withering crossfire, trapped at the base of the hills. Down the slopes, Sherikov's guards raced toward the stalled cars. Clouds of heat rose up and boiled across the plain as the cars fired up at the running men. A robot gun dropped like a slug onto the plain and screamed toward the cars, firing as it came. Dixon twisted nervously. Only a few minutes, any time now. He shaded his eyes and peered up at the sky. No sign of them yet. He wondered about Reinhardt. No signal had come up from below. Clearly Reinhardt had run into trouble. No doubt there was desperate fighting going on in the maze of underground tunnels, the intricate web of passages that honeycombed the earth below the mountains. In the air, Sherikov's few defense ships were taking on the police raiders. Outnumbered, the defense ships darted rapidly, wildly, putting up a futile fight. Sherikov's guards streamed out onto the plain. Crouching and running, they advanced toward the stalled cars. The police airships screeched down at them, guns thundering. Dixon held his breath. When the missiles arrived, the first missile struck. A section of the mountain vanished, turned to smoke and foaming gases. The wave of heat slapped Dixon across the face, spinning him around. Quickly he re-entered his ship and took off, shooting rapidly away from the scene. He glanced back. A second and third missile had arrived. Great gaping pits yawned among the mountains, vast sections missing like broken teeth. Now the missiles could penetrate to the underground laboratories below. On the ground, the surface cars halted beyond the danger area, waiting for the missile attack to finish. When the eighth missile had struck, the cars again moved forward. No more missiles fell. Dixon swung his ship around, heading back toward the scene. The laboratory was exposed. The top sections of it had been ripped open. The laboratory lay like a tin can, torn apart by mighty explosions, its first floors visible from the air. Men and cars were pouring down into it, fighting with the guards swarming to the surface. Dixon watched intently. Sherikov's men were bringing up heavy guns, big robot artillery. But the police ships were diving again. Sherikov's defensive patrols had been cleaned from the sky. The police ships whined down, arcing over the exposed laboratory. Small bombs fell, whistling down, pinpointing the artillery rising to the surface on the remaining lift stages. Abruptly, Dixon's vidscreen clicked. Dixon turned toward it. Reinhardt's features formed. "Call off the attack!" His uniform was torn. A deep bloody gash crossed his cheek. He grinned sourly at Dixon, pushing his tangled hair back out of his face. "Quite a fight. Sherikov? He's called off his guards. We've agreed to a truce. It's all over. No more needed." Reinhardt gasped for breath, wiping grime and sweat from his neck. "Land your ship and come down here at once." "The variable man?" "That comes next," Reinhardt said grimly. He adjusted his gun tube. "I want you down here for that part. I want you to be in on the kill." Reinhardt turned away from the vidscreen. In the corner of the room, Sherikov stood silently, saying nothing. "Well?" Reinhardt barked. "Where is he? Where will I find him?" Sherikov licked his lips nervously, glancing up at Reinhardt. "Commissioner, are you sure? The attack has been called off. Your labs are safe. So is your life. Now it's your turn to come through." Reinhardt gripped his gun, moving toward Sherikov. "Where is he?" For a moment Sherikov hesitated. Then slowly his huge body sagged, defeated. He shook his head wearily. "All right, I'll show you where he is." His voice was hardly audible, a dry whisper. "Down this way. Come on." Reinhardt followed Sherikov out of the room, into the corridor. Police and guards were working rapidly, clearing the debris and ruins away, putting out the hydrogen fires that burned everywhere. "No tricks, Sherikov." "No tricks." Sherikov nodded resignedly. "Thomas Cole is by himself, in a wing lab off the main rooms." "Cole?" "The variable man. That's his name." The Pole turned his massive head a little. "He has a name." Reinhardt waved his gun. "Hurry up. I don't want anything to go wrong. This is the part I came for." "You must remember something, Commissioner." "What is it?" Sherikov stopped walking. "Commissioner, nothing must happen to the globe, the control turret. Everything depends on it. The war, our whole—" "I know. Nothing will happen to the damn thing. Let's go." "If it should get damaged, I'm not after the globe. I'm interested only in Thomas Cole." They came to the end of the corridor and stopped before a metal door. Sherikov nodded at the door. "In there." Reinhardt moved back. "Open the door." "Open it yourself. I don't want to have anything to do with it." Reinhardt shrugged. He stepped up to the door. Holding his gun level, he raised his hand, passing it in front of the eye circuit. Nothing happened. Reinhardt frowned. He pushed the door with his hand. The door slid open. Reinhardt was looking into a small laboratory. He glimpsed a workbench, tools, heaps of equipment, measuring devices, and in the center of the bench, the transparent globe, the control turret. "Cole?" Reinhardt advanced quickly into the room. He glanced around him, suddenly alarmed. "Where—" The room was empty. Thomas Cole was gone. When the first missile struck, Cole stopped work and sat listening. Far off, a distant rumble rolled through the earth, shaking the floor under him. On the bench, tools and equipment danced up and down. A pair of pliers fell crashing to the floor. A box of screws tipped over, spilling its minute contents out. Cole listened for a time. Presently he lifted the transparent globe from the bench. With carefully controlled hands, he held the globe up, running his fingers gently over the surface, his faded blue eyes thoughtful. Then, after a time, he placed the globe back on the bench, in its mount. The globe was finished. A faint glow of pride moved through the variable man. The globe was the finest job he had ever done. The deep rumblings ceased. Cole became instantly alert. He jumped down from his stool, hurrying across the room to the door. For a moment he stood by the door listening intently. He could hear noise on the other side, shouts, guards rushing past, dragging heavy equipment, working frantically. A rolling crash echoed down the corridor and lapped against his door. The concussion spun him around. Again, a tide of energy shook the walls and floor and sent him down on his knees. The lights flickered and winked out. Cole fumbled in the dark until he found a flashlight. Power failure. He could hear crackling flames. Abruptly, the lights came on again, an ugly yellow, then faded back out. Cole bent down and examined the door with his flashlight, a magnetic lock, dependent on an externally induced electric flux. He grabbed a screwdriver and pried at the door. For a moment, it held, then it fell open. Cole stepped warily out into the corridor. Everything was in shambles. Guards wandered everywhere, burned and half-blinded. Two lay groaning under a pile of wrecked equipment, fused guns, reeking metal. The air was heavy with the smell of burning wiring and plastic, a thick cloud that choked him and made him bend double as he advanced. "Halt!" a guard gasped feebly, struggling to rise. Cole pushed past him and down the corridor. Two small robot guns, still functioning, glided past him hurriedly toward the drumming chaos of battle. He followed. At a major intersection, the fight was in full swing. Sherikov's guards fought security police, crouched behind pillars and barricades, firing wildly, desperately. Again, the whole structure shuddered as a great booming blast ignited someplace above. Bombs? Shells? Cole threw himself down as a violet beam cut past his ear and disintegrated the wall behind him. A security policeman, wild-eyed, firing erratically. One of Sherikov's guards winged him, and his gun skidded to the floor. A robot cannon turned toward him as he made his way past the intersection. He began to run. The cannon rolled along behind him, aiming itself uncertainly. Cole hunched over as he shambled rapidly along, gasping for breath. In the flickering yellow light, he saw a handful of security police advancing, firing expertly, intent on a line of defense Sherikov's guards had hastily set up. The robot cannon altered its course to take them on, and Cole escaped around a corner. He was in the main lab, the big chamber where Icarus himself rose, the vast, squat column. Icarus! A solid wall of guards surrounded him, grim-faced, hugging guns and protection shields. But the security police were leaving Icarus alone. Nobody wanted to damage him. Cole evaded a lone guard tracking him and reached the far side of the lab. It took him only a few seconds to find the force field generator. There was no switch. For a moment that puzzled him. And then he remembered. The guard had controlled it from his wrist. Too late to worry about that. With his screwdriver, he unfastened the plate over the generator and ripped out the wiring in handfuls. The generator came loose and he dragged it away from the wall. The screen was off, thank God. He managed to carry the generator into a side corridor. Crouched in a heap, Cole bent over the generator, deft fingers flying. He pulled the wiring to him and laid it out on the floor, tracing the circuits with feverish haste. The adaptation was easier than he had expected. The screen flowed at right angles to the wiring for a distance of 6 feet. Each lead was shielded on one side. The field radiated outward, leaving a hollow cone in the center. He ran the wiring through his belt, down his trouser legs, under his shirt, all the way to his wrists and ankles. He was just snatching up the heavy generator when 2 security police appeared. They raised their blasters and fired point blank. Cole clicked on the screen. A vibration leaped through him that snapped his jaw and danced up his body. He staggered away, half stupefied by the surging force that radiated out from him. The violet rays struck the field and deflected harmlessly. He was safe. This concludes the 4th part of 5 total of The Variable Man by Philip K. Dick, produced by Best Audiobooks for free.